Hey guys, we're back.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, there's Charlie. Hey,
Hey,
Charlie.
Charlie.
Hey,
Great to see you.
Hey, I hope there's not too much road noise on my end.
So it's kind of a funny week, y'all. We're all a little off today, I think. Except for Charlie, he might not be off. But I was running right at the line, and then Carrie, you can tell them what happened with you.
Yeah, so it's good news. I had gotten a promotion for work. Yay.
Yay!
And we were hiring somebody to go into my old position. So this person is starting tomorrow. And so we work primarily from home. So my manager and I were just coordinating with who was going to meet him in the office, like whether it was going to be me or her, going in to meet the person in the office tomorrow. And it's really weird. I've never onboarded somebody with a remote situation before.
Yeah.
I
So
have.
yeah, so it's going to be a little bit different, but
Hard.
I'm excited. This person I think they're going to fit in really well with the team, and
That's
um,
good.
but it's just I'm not going to lie, I'm spoiled, y'all. I take the train, which I'm blessed that I'm able to do that. I'm able to take the train in, and my place of employment pays for that. And I don't live very far from the train station, but still I'm used to that little 5-minute commute, from the bedroom to the office.
Yeah.
So I'm spoiled, y'all. Oh, thank
Yeah,
you, Jeannie. Thank you.
it'll be an
Well.
adjustment.
Okay. So chapter 9 this week, guys.
Well, I'm not going to stick around. I just wanted to say hi because my daughter got married 2 days ago.
Yay.
And
How did that go?
Oh, pardon me?
How did everything go?
It went really well. It was a beautiful wedding, and they're staying down in Seattle. Although they actually came to church this morning, and so we saw them. And they're actually taking my sister back to the airport, and then tomorrow morning they're flying out to Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
That's going to be
so
fun.
it was really great, and it was really nice because there were people at the wedding who hadn't seen me since I'd lost weight, and I definitely got a lot of people complimenting the fact that I looked so much thinner, and so it was kind of cool. It was nice. It's always fun, and I got to surprise my brother and sister-in-law. They did not even know that I had changed my diet at all.
I love the video.
Yeah, so I took the video. It wasn't the greatest quality, but got to surprise them. And, yeah, so now my brother actually, he's been doing a ketogenic diet. My sister-in-law and my brother, they've been doing a ketogenic diet for quite a while now. And he now that he knows I have a YouTube channel, he wants to come on my channel for a live stream because he has seen so much improvement doing the ketogenic diet. He got exposed to Agent Orange in the Vietnam War.
Oh.
And he would love to be able to get word out to Vietnam, other people who have Agent Orange effects, that the ketogenic diet can help them. And so we're going to be planning, I told him I got to have things settled down a little bit, but we're going to be planning, and he's going to be coming on my channel, and we're going to be doing a live stream about keto diet helping Agent Orange, victims.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's really cool. So yeah, and so I know one of my nephew, who's only 4 years younger than me, is talking about wanting to do a 30-day trial on carnivore after we talked, and he saw the effects it's had on me. So yeah, that was exciting. But yeah, so my youngest is married now. We are now empty nesters.
Oh.
Yeah. So we've got errands to run. We're taking the groom's suit back to it was a rental and stuff. So we're taking it back, and we're doing some other stuff. So anyways, I was so busy I didn't even get a chance to read the chapter. So I will for next week get caught up and read both chapters. I'll
Okay.
send you guys whatever suggestions I have on our next book. but if you guys just choose something, that's fine with me too.
Oh, we'll ask you to.
So awesome. All right. Well, I just want to say hi, and I hope you guys have a great time. I'll be watching the replay.
Okay.
All
See
right.
you, Lynn. Congrats.
Take care, Lynn.
Okay, Charlie, what have you had going on this week? Anything?
Celebrated a birthday with the wife, so I'm 40,
Yay.
41 now. So I went to a
Happy birthday.
steakhouse. Thank you. And I wound up ordering 2 24-ounce porterhouse steaks and demolishing it. So
Wow.
interesting. I told the waiter, I've had my appetizer steak. I'm ready for the dinner steak now.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
So there you go.
I bet he was like, "Excuse me, sir."
yeah. So, and then I got a chance to share my weight loss story on Dustin's channel over at Keto Simple yesterday. So that was kind of cool. So that's
I'll have to
all
check
that's
that
going
out.
on. Yeah, that's all that's going on in my world. Thanks.
That's awesome. Well, I guess it's my turn now. I have on my horsies because the Kentucky Derby was yesterday.
Oh, yes. And you're a
And,
Kentucky gal.
I'm a Kentucky gal, so I have to represent. Also, today is Cinco de Mayo, so I was like, should I wear the horses or should I have some green cactus earrings? I thought, that's kind of, maybe that's kind of a little, I don't have any sombreros, anything. Anyway, so, but my Cinco de Mayo today is also my 1-year carniversary.
Yay!
So I'm so excited about that. My husband took me earlier and we went to Kroger to go get me some steaks out of the case, the good steaks. And so we got 3 of those. And then we turned around and they had their ribeye roast on sale once again for $8.99 a pound. And I was like, yes, score. So I got the expensive steaks and then I got the super cheap steaks and I'm going to cut those up. I might make a video of me poorly butchering them. I don't know yet, but anyway. So yeah, so that's what's going on with me. And I may even do another live eating my steaks after this one, but I haven't decided. So yeah, I'm an impromptu type person,
Well, I've got something to share with y'all. And I did film like a couple little shorts, so I'm going to post those. I just haven't put them together yet. But I tried something for the first time, y'all.
What?
I tried oysters.
Ooh.
I've never had them before.
Did you like them?
They were baked oysters, and they did have a little bit of cheese, but they had cheese and bacon on them.
Oh.
And yes, they were good. I was pleasantly surprised.
I mean, cheese and bacon, that can make anything good, right?
Right. Yeah. So that was pretty cool that, we had gone to a little town outside of Monteagle in, like kind of the southern eastern part of Tennessee, and a little town called Tracy City. And there's a great place there called Hank's, and they are so accommodating. Like they'll give me extra pieces of bacon on my burger. So like I got a double bacon cheeseburger with no bun and extra bacon and stuff. And but they were having a Cinco de Mayo special, and they were, telling us the specials and stuff. And they were talking about the oysters, and I had never tried them before. So I asked my friend James, I was like, are you game on trying some oysters? So
I want to try some.
Yeah. So they were good. They were good.
Awesome. I hear they're really good for you. So if I could just get them down the hatch, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I didn't
Sunny,
want to do like they had raw ones, and then they also
Yeah, I
had
don't
fried.
like
And of course,
that.
I didn't want to go through the whole what do you fry them in thing.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, but the baked ones, I was like, okay, I think that should be safe.
Yeah.
And they were really good. But so each one had a little bit of cheese, bacon, and a jalapeno slice.
Oh, that
On
sounds
top.
good.
Yeah. They were
Well,
good.
I like all those things, so maybe I'll have to try it sometime. Okay, now chapter 9. Exit trans fats, enter something worse.
Yeah, I think
And
it's
we're
worse.
Is this a Metallica reference? We don't know. But who was it? Was it Charlie that brought that up last week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Enter Sandman reference.
Yeah, I think Charlie was the one who noticed that.
Yeah, and now I can't get it out of my mind. All right.
I know I had that lyric in my head.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I was watching some videos last night. I like to watch reaction videos, and like there's that show that they did in Moscow, and I think it was 91, right after the whole fall of the Soviet Union and everything. And there was this big heavy metal show. And anyway, that song, Enter Sandman, was a big song, and a lot of the reactors react to that. So I watched several reactions last night, and I was like, yeah, I think that's what she meant in this chapter. I think so.
Yeah. So who wants to start out? One of you guys. Anybody?
Well, let's see.
So it starts out talking about Walter Willett.
Yeah. He pops in and out, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's, my impression of old Walter is I don't get the impression that he's like, that he has, a bad spirit about him. I just get the impression that he's just kind of like I don't want to say a bumbling idiot, because I'm sure he's very intelligent, but just not real careful in his reporting, and not real careful in what he's pushing for,
Like he's got really good intentions. I believe he does.
Yeah, that's what I think. But I just think he's just, he has these ideas in his mind, and instead of practicing the science that he knows how to practice, I'm certain, he just, because he's a Harvard epidemiologist, and he's just, they say he's the opposite for personality from Ansel Keys, very soft-spoken and mild-mannered, gentle, willowy man with a walrus mustache and some very distinct opinions about things that may or may not be correct, but he pushes them anyway. So,
but and the problem with all these good intentions is that it kind of snowballs into something else, because
as my mother used to say, the road to hell was paved with good intentions.
And that is so true. That is so true. And it's like, so I understand, of course, about the trans fats. I mean, I think we all do. No matter who you are, I think we pretty much all, whatever part of the eating spectrum or whatever, we all agree that those are terrible. But then it's like, in people's zest to improve things, they sometimes might jump the gun a little bit on recommending something that, as she hints, as Nina hints, might be even worse than those. Yeah. And of course, it's the vegetable oils, and like, of course, I mean, because you get to a point, it's like, well, okay, we can't use tallow. We can't use any of the, saturated fat-based cooking oils. So what are we going to do? I mean, we have to cook it in something. And so, of course, hello, vegetable oils. But then, and I can remember, like, back in the day when I worked in restaurants, and, it's very intense, like in terms of like what you have to do to like filter out and to clean those fryers and everything. And I don't think when they were making these recommendations, they realized just how bad, that these new vegetable oils were going to be for people. They had all these good intentions. They really wanted to do the right thing, but it was just, okay, we can't have saturated fats, and trans fats are bad. So
they've went from a natural fat to worse and they keep going one step worse with each, each change is just bringing something worse. And then pretty soon they're going to come back around to, oh, hey, how about we use saturated fat from animals? That's a good idea.
Well,
And
you're
we'll
a
be
little
like,
more
yes,
optimistic than
finally.
I am.
We're back
Although
to where we
Buffalo
started.
Wild Wings uses, I think they fry their wings in tallow. I believe that's what.
Yeah. I mean, I
So
feel
yeah,
like it's coming back around. I'm hearing about more people using tallow on their skin,
yeah.
and I think the more we can get this information out there to more and more people, it's the people that make these decisions with their pocketbook basically and force these companies to do these things. Although I will say one thing I gained from this chapter, or one thing that struck me as odd from this chapter, is I keep noticing these companies are wanting to change, based on this little scare that comes out, this information comes out, and they just I feel like they just freak out and just change before they even are required to change. And some of these changes that are made, I'm thinking, okay, I really don't even feel like people would stop eating that product. Let's face it, nobody's getting Oreos and being like, oh, I hope my Oreos are healthy. Like, everybody knows Oreos are not freaking healthy. They don't care what you put in it. They're going to eat it.
But they reduce your LDL.
Yeah.
And that's a recurring subject in all of this, like when they're talking about these fats and talking about the fact that the LDL, that was like the main concern. And it's like, and I know that that's partially because of the narrative that's been present, for the, since the 1950s. But
Hey,
at the
Lisa, we
same
just
time,
started.
yeah, they just keep going, it's this whole LDL thing over and over. That's what governs any decision now.
Yes, exactly. It's like they're scared to death of the old LDL that doesn't even have good data to, it's not like it's not settled science, we should say. So.
Yeah, the outcome may have been good to, get away from trans fat, but it's questionable the means through which it was done, with that narrow focus on LDL. And, you wonder if it just sets a bad precedent going forward. We know it does set a bad precedent going forward because, if you're consistently focused on LDL, you're going to miss a lot of other things that probably should be paid attention to.
Yep. And the more complicated we are trying to make these things, the more complicated they become. And the more, like they said towards the end of the chapter, they were talking about how, or she was talking about how, with each one of these changes comes more and more ingredients. They're having to replace, like, people are going to notice if their Triscuits taste different or their Oreos or whatever. So with each of these changes, not only are they having to try this, try that, to replicate something, but the way, the texture and the taste and whatnot, without it being weird and different, but they're having to add like 6 ingredients to replace this one ingredient that did a fine job on its own. Oreos used to be made out of what? Tallow?
Yep.
Yeah. I want some tallow Oreos. I don't know about y'all, but
heck yeah. And we talked about this a little bit last week, in that I'm not saying that any of the junk foods would be something good to have on a regular basis. Okay. Like the way I grew up, though, we had things like that very rarely. It was a treat. But at the same time, if those same old ingredients, the regular fats were in there rather than all these other oils and things that just everything that they've stuck in there to try to, give it flavor. Think about that. How I just think that while it's certainly not something we would want to eat all the time, regardless, if those ingredients were there, the ones based on the saturated fats, I think it would be so much better in general for, as a thing, just for us to eat. There again, as a treat, not something that we
Well,
would have every day, but
I mean,
it's just weird because, like, you go back and we were talking about this too, about like how people were just thinner, like in the 70s and
mhm.
then the early 80s, and those products were around. But then when they started monkeying with the formulas because of the public pressure and everything, then gradually these things became, they had of course, the trans fats, and then now they've got the other vegetable oils in them, and it's just terrible for us. And of course, you can tell people are sicker, they're fatter, their health is worse. And it's just, you just have to wonder, if they would have just left it alone. And the companies, I know that they, like, for example, my son actually is friends with a food scientist.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, yeah. And I met her, and she was a sweet girl, and she did not have nefarious intentions
He
in
doesn't know
becoming a
what
food.
she's doing.
No, she enjoys food, and
Yeah.
it almost, she could have been a chef. She kind of reminds me of Chris Cooking Nashville,
Oh,
just
yeah.
in the way that she appreciates ingredients and how they, how you can put certain flavors together to get that bliss point and stuff. But I mean, that was just something that she enjoyed. She enjoyed putting flavors and things together to do that. And so that's what she does. And she works for a major chocolate company
Mhm.
in doing that. And of course, everybody, when we were talking to her, and we were all, oh, wow, that's a great job, because she got to do taste testing and stuff. And so we were, like, joking with her about that. But the thing is, I really just, I know there's big food, and I know that they have these food scientists there to create these bliss points. But at the same time, they are working toward giving the public what they want, and they are in business. And it's like, I just think that if they had just left the ingredients alone back before
Mhm.
and had been able to, without the public pressure to get rid of those other fats, and instead use all this fake stuff that humans haven't even been eating for 100 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
It's just they've been manipulated with now, and yet now. And I'm not a pro big food person by any means, but I'm just saying now all of a sudden big food is this bad guy, but they've been trying to do what they've been told to do.
they've been jumping through hoops left and
Yeah.
right. They're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, we're doing this now," you know? I mean, I don't think they're great or anything, but it
Mm-mm.
makes you wonder if they had quit, if they had not monkeyed around with the ingredients and allowed them to just use the saturated fat way back when, would we even have a problem today that would lead us to, because most of us do carnivore or keto or whatever proper human diet we do, because of our health, because of health reasons. So it makes you wonder, like if we just had the sweets, yeah, that would be bad, but sweets have been around forever. Would our health be at the point where we would even require such a drastic
Mm-hmm.
change in our diet? You know,
Yeah,
makes you
Exactly.
wonder.
I thought it's interesting that before reading this book, I kind of had this impression of big food. They want to make you eat unhealthy and stuff. But after reading almost this entire book, Nina really paints this, softens that image quite a bit, and so that's really kind of changed my mind. Just kind of understanding the different pressures they are. I mean, it's a multi-faceted food system, so it's
Yeah.
interesting how all these combination of different stakeholders, motives, means, and opportunities kind of coalesce to where we are today. So I thought that was just really surprising, just the softening of big food as the big bad, right? So I don't know. I
Yeah.
thought that was
And
interesting.
people have a right to eat junk food if they want to eat junk food. Like I would I would fight for other people's right to eat the food that they choose as well. If someone wants to just eat nothing but Oreos all day, I mean, doesn't hurt me, and let them do it, but we should have, even in our junk food, we should have choices that aren't, just extremely detrimental to your health. And as we know from all the changes that they've made, I mean, some of these more recent changes, they're downright dangerous. Like, the studies that they've done on mice, which,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can argue about how that relates to humans, but I mean, just all of these just toxic, um, just the toxic byproducts of the oils and stuff that they're basically forced to use now.
Well,
Like,
part of the whole cholesterol hypothesis got started with a study on rabbits. So, I
yeah,
mean, in terms of, in other words, if people were going to nitpick about the studies, it's like they were talking about feeding saturated fat to rabbits and causing atherosclerosis. So it's like,
yeah,
hello, you can't use this as a part of the basis of your, as the basis of your hypothesis, but then turn around and criticize this study,
yeah.
And of course, yeah, we're not rabbits and we're not mice. You have to take things into context.
But those toxic byproducts are still
Yeah.
toxic,
Oh,
regardless.
yeah, they are. They
Those
are.
those oils, they go rancid so easily, and
Yes, and they're reused
yeah,
too. Like especially like in the restaurants, like for the fryers and everything, for example. And they talk like they were talking about, or Nina was talking about in the book, about how like the more that they're used in the restaurants, the more toxic, or you know what I'm saying, the more
yeah,
cycles that they go through, and we don't know. It was about the bonding and the number of, I don't know. I sort of went a little, I'm gonna just admit it, I went a little glassy eyed at some of it.
same.
Um,
It's a lot to take in, especially
yeah,
towards
it
the
is.
end.
It's
I was
she's
catching myself, like, drifting off. I'm like, "Oh, wait, come back, rewind, rewind."
Yeah, she is so thorough, and I admire that. But
Yes.
I'm not going to pretend that I recall all the facts. But they were talking about like the um, that we don't know all those combinations and how they affect humans when they consume them, basically. And it's a scary thought when they're just like, oh, but at least it's not saturated fat. We'll just go ahead and feed you these compounds and, okay. But it can't be any worse than this saturated fat over here, even though we've eaten this for millennia. When you think about it, it's just like, really?
Yeah.
But that's been their reasoning, basically.
And then she goes on to talk about the process of I can't say it, interestification.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, oil chemists had been working on this type of new fat on and off for decades, and stepped up efforts in the late 1970s with the potential, with Kumarel's work first exposed the potential health dangers of trans fats. And it says, to understand esterification, there's yet another detail about fat chemistry to know. All fatty acid chains are bound in packs of 3, bound together by a glycerol molecule at their base, like a pitchfork. These pitchforks are the triglycerides that we've learned about, the fats floating around our bloodstream, which at high levels are a risk factor for heart disease. I can't say it again. Interestification works by swapping around the order of the times, but it's an inexact science. And yeah, so it's just like we're just doing all this stuff that may or may not be better. This guy says, this Gil LaVille, whoever he was. I can't remember who he was now, but probably a scientist.
Cruella de Vil's cousin.
Yeah, he basically says we just don't know much about it. It could be another trans fat lurking. We really need to look at it and understand it. And, and then they're just calling it oil on the packaging.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of sneaky stuff that goes into your foods. The labeling is very misleading. And, vegetable oils, it says rancidity in vegetable oils is caused by one type of fatty acid called linoleic.
Yeah.
Which the process of hydrogenation was able to reduce. And one intriguing idea for minimizing linoleic involved altering the oil at its source by breeding soybeans. This is what I thought was really interesting. They were breeding soybeans that would produce oils naturally low in this type of fatty acid. But then basically it sounded like they just kind of dropped it because, they just required a lot of extra work keeping them separated from the regular soybeans to avoid contamination. And so the low linolenic soybeans have not yet enjoyed their day in the sun. So it's kind of like, well, we have something that's better, but it's kind of difficult to do. So we're just not going to worry about it.
Yeah.
It's just one thing after another. Like, she's really researched this stuff very thoroughly. But yeah, it's just to simplify everything like I like to do. Basically,
Right.
if they hadn't have messed with it in the very beginning, none of this would be necessary.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
What do you think, Charlie?
There was a couple of things I found interesting. So there was one on the impact of how foods are engineered based on their desired claims they want to make on the food label. So
Yes.
she was talking to an executive, and this may carry to your son's friend who's a food scientist and kind of what they do. It begins with what a company wants to have on the food facts panel. He said, do they want a low in saturated fat claim, for instance? That claim requires 1 gram or less of saturated fat on the food label. From there, a food is reverse engineered. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That's a lot different. Well, I don't know. I mean, that's different than how I thought foods were kind of conceived. They're thinking about it from the end first, like what can I claim on the package and in the food label, and then let's reverse engineer some foods that go from there. And then there's another comment in the chat here that kind of made me think, Nina's telling the story from like the American perspective, what's happening in the United States, how they had to reformulate everything based on the different rules. And there is someone that said that, in Europe, the regulations. So, I think ketchup has to be formulated a little bit differently, in Europe than it does in the US, even though it's the same product. So it makes me think that, food companies still have to play this delicate balance of, I've got to have Oreos one way here in the US, maybe another way in Europe, and maybe a different way in Asia, as an example. So I don't know. That just seems really, really, really confusing to me. So.
Yeah, and one thing that I thought was interesting was how they were talking about now they might actually bring back the palm oil, or that they are actually bringing it back. What'd you say?
Yeah, some of the companies are. They're already bringing back the palm oil,
and they have shown that it has a lot of health benefits. Where we were scared to death of it. Now it's like, oh, okay, this is okay to use now. I don't know. It's all just, it makes my brain hurt.
Well, it does give a better understanding of I hate to use the word politics, but I mean, I guess you would have to say it's politics because of the maneuvering behind. Of course, there was this hypothesis. It all started out with the whole saturated fat is bad. And these food companies, while there again, we don't want to eat junk food, but they were using saturated fats. They were using things like coconut oil, palm oil. They were using, lard, things like that in their foods. And then and restaurants were doing that too. They were cooking in tallow and then they were, because of this whole narrative, I mean, they were told they had to stop. And so, of course, that costs billions of dollars in terms of just, doing research. They're again trying to work your way back into, okay, how do we make this taste decent? Because people are going to notice that our snack wells or whatever, they don't taste the same anymore. And so we're going to have to figure out how to make them taste the same. And which I know many of us in this, I'm not saying that we should feel sorry for the food companies necessarily, but at the same time, they have done what's been asked of them to do. And then now it's like, well, look, your product is garbage. Well, they were kind of told they had to make their product garbage, So it gives you, like Charlie said, it gives you a whole different perspective on just how all of these machinations working together have really just messed up the whole food supply. It's messed up everything, really. And it all started with this whole saturated fat is bad.
Yeah, I agree. It all started with, probably somebody's agenda that, like you said, saturated fat is bad. We shouldn't eat animal products. We should be plant-based, plant-based, plant-based. Well, plant-based doesn't get you good Oreos, folks. Okay?
Nope.
So
it doesn't get you good anything, really.
I mean, if you want a salad, that sure, but it seems like they're pushing of that agenda, that's where the real problem lies. That's where all this stuff comes from, is their idea that people should just really be eating vegetable, plant-based, lean meats.
One of the criticisms of carnivore is that, we don't have a lot of long-term randomized control studies or anything like that supporting this way of eating. But, you read this book and you realize, well, the current low-fat, mostly vegetarian way of eating doesn't really have that support either, even though there's been a lot of time and money and, support for it, but it just hasn't, the data just hasn't been there, for the last, couple decades and stuff. So, so I think it's partly valid. Yeah. Carnivores don't have those control trials. And I mean, that we're starting to get there in those directions, but, really we're all kind of in the same boat on that. I thought there was I'm quoting Walter Willett slightly out of context here, but he was at a conference in Aspen trying to explain his 30,000 trans fat death figure to a group of toxicologists. So I'm taking it slightly out of context here, but because I think it kind of surmises unintentionally our scenario right now. So we are really conducting a very large human scale, uncontrolled, unmonitored national experiment. And I mean, that's essentially what the food pyramid, my plate, your low-fat guidelines are. So I just thought that was, that really stood out to me that, just kind of Walter Willett there, that, that there is some truth to what he says there.
Yeah. And, I don't think there's ever going to be a really good study that, conclusively proves that one way of eating is better than another because of the nature of, it would kind of be impossible to do that kind of study. You would have to, in order to do like a, it would just be impossible to do like a double blind, randomized, controlled, and all this stuff. You would have to have people in a prison, and they would And that's considered inhumane to do. So, I mean, it's just very, very, very difficult to get any good information from dietary studies, you know.
The
Yeah,
closest they could come is if they took people who willingly ate vegan, for example, people who
Or like
willingly ate
us, you know.
carnivore, and
Yeah.
then, compared blood markers and things like that.
Yes,
And in
but you
that
still
way, then
can't.
the people nobody's being coerced into anything, and they're just, I would think that maybe somehow something like that could be done, but even then, you're still depending on people telling you what they eat versus anything
Well,
being controlled.
and you still can't isolate for that variable of the carnivore diet,
Right.
because I don't know about you, but most of the carnivores I know, or people changing their diet, period, they're also changing other things in their
Yep.
life. So we can't definitively say that carnivore is what's making us. We can't say that the presence of meat is what's making us feel better. It could be the absence of
Oh,
something,
yeah.
or it could be the community that we have now. It could be like, there's so many, like, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying
Oh, I
there's
think
so
it's
many
all of
different
those things.
variables, you
Yeah, I
know.
think it's all of them. I think
Yeah.
it's the community, it's the cleaner eating, it's, paying attention to what you're doing, it's eliminating alcohol, it's all of those things, stopping smoking, whatever other things you might happen to do. I've found that a lot of the folks in the carnivore community and keto community eliminate all of those things, and then plus they get involved in the community, so it's all that stuff together. And so it's just like with, what is it, Dean Ornish, I think, was the one who had the studies that supposedly being vegan was the way, but then all these other areas with community, with meditation, and eliminating alcohol, quitting smoking, all of these other things. So I am such a proponent, for example, of meditation. I mean, that's something that I do every day, and it just gets my head straight. So, of course, I think that anybody that incorporates that into their life, it's going to make a difference regardless of how they're eating. But then you add all these other components together, and I can see, so it's like you say, it's a confounding variable.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, Running Tap says Dave Mack has interviewed how many people helping their own health.
Mhm.
Anecdotes must feature in evidence, surely. And I totally agree. And that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, like, to be a truly scientific study with a true scientific result, the way
Yep.
that they want to do it, the way that science requires a high degree of evidence, we can't do it in this way, even though we know, like, I can do 2 and 2 and it equals 4 to me, and that's all the evidence I need. I don't need a scientific study. I think that, just like we say in the carnivore community, that thousands of anecdotes at least makes a hypothesis, right? And
Right.
a
That's
pretty
true.
darn good one. And they could pick it to death, but I don't care, because this is my N of one. That's why it's so important to have your N of one, to
Mhm.
know what works for you, you
Yep.
know. But yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I love Dave Mack's channel. I've been watching all of his interviews lately, and it just, like, fires me up. And I love
Yes.
the way that he interviews too. He is a most excellent interviewer, because he listens and he doesn't interject constantly, and he doesn't give a yeah, sure. And I don't realize how much that, like, you would think, if you're interviewing somebody, you should do that, but you don't realize how important it is to just sit there and give that person space and time to talk, And for the listener, it's wow, it's a world of difference. So I love him, and I watch almost every one of his interviews.
I do too.
So, and then I wanted to go back to Lisa's comment. It was covering most of Charlie's head there. So I wanted to bring it back after he finished talking. But she said, yes, I think people should have a choice, but I think the lies about the food pyramid being healthy and red meat being bad for you must stop.
Yep.
I stopped eating red meat for 20 years because of their lies.
Yep.
And I absolutely agree. And if I wasn't such a rebel, I would have also stopped eating red meat and things that were bad for me, but I just didn't care. I was like, I'm going to eat full fat everything because that's what tastes good. I'm going to eat full sugar everything because that's what tastes good. Now, the sugar, it caught up with me, but I think I did pretty good with the full fat.
Yeah, there was some, Nina was talking about, the nurses. I mean, she starts out talking about the nurses' health study, tracking 100,000 nurses since 1976. They use these food frequency questionnaires to generate data, and they can generate lots of data for, it's very economical to, send someone a questionnaire and have some people crunch numbers in the background. But it's all observational studies. But she also points out that Walter Willett, when he came out with that 30,000 deaths due to trans fat claim, he also published like 32 papers based off of that. So if you're in a field that publish or perish type of world, your food frequency questionnaire based studies can generate a lot of articles for relatively cheap. Whereas Kim, you were talking about how expensive and detailed a carefully controlled study would be, and she says, like, even in those cases, after doing it for several months, several years, you might generate 1 or 2 articles. So where's the economic incentive there? So I thought that's kind of interesting, because as carnivores, it seems like almost every year there's an article in the headlines that red meat causes cancer, and then everybody in the carnivore world basically gets a lesson in, correlation is not causation, all those nuances and stuff. But I just think that, I don't know, it almost seems like without fail, like every year we'll see one of those studies pop up, and that'll dominate the headlines for a while. But no one's saying that, hey, it's just a hypothesis, it's not, not proving anything. So but,
I think that's the key, that's fine if they want to release study results, but they act like these are like, randomized controlled trials, that they don't differentiate. They don't say, well, this is just based on food frequency questionnaires, or this is based on this data that's been collected. They don't make that distinction. And so basically, by eliminating that, they are just leading people to think that these are actual scientific studies when they're not. And that's misleading, because there are people that, tons of people in the carnivore community and keto community, when you hear their stories, they talk about how they were convinced that the saturated fat and the red meat and meat in general was bad and all of this. And because, the whole eggs thing, and it's just, it's really frustrating that they get by with, and I guess it's the whole clickbait headline mentality that, actually man has fallen for that ever since there's been headlines, right? But it's but it is true that that's what gets people to read or to click or whatever. And so nobody ever reads the study itself. For example, they don't go to PubMed and see what it actually says. They don't read further in the story to find out that, oh, well, that's really not what they're saying at all. Because a lot of times the headline will be something totally different than what's found in the study. This is wild. You just have to do your own
almost
research, be your
always.
own advocate, and just read, and just don't take my word for it. Don't take Kim's word or Charlie's or anybody else's. You go out there and read for yourself and find out. Gather information from many sources and just look at it for yourself.
And once again, this is kind of like just about everything else in our society. Unfortunately, it's a follow the money, you know.
Mhm.
It's kind of like what Charlie was saying about how they just design these products around like a few buzzwords. We're not trying to create good products here. We're just trying to like sell things. You know, we don't care if we make the world's greatest cookie and people love it. We just want to create something that will get into the most pocketbooks.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
I
all.
don't know if
The thing that's like it doesn't raise your cholesterol, or it's low fat, or it's whatever. They're kind of backing from that rather than, oh, this is just an awesome cookie.
And those are like hits on YouTube, you know, whenever you put certain words or an arrow or something in your thumbnail, and it'll get so many clicks. That's what they're getting, is their clicks. People cha-ching, cha-ching, people paying with their money, you know, for those words.
Mm-hmm.
What were you saying, Charlie?
there's one, I mean, it's slightly off topic from the focus that Nina's book is, you know, focusing on, you know, fat, obviously. But I think a lot of these snack companies, for a while, they were owned by like cigarette companies before they had to kind of disown them and stuff. So part of me wonders if some of the DNA for, you know, when they were owned by the cigarette companies was imparted to a lot of these food companies, because you want to make them addictive. I mean, that's a pretty good model for sales, you know. So I don't know that I completely buy her softening of that stance on big food, that they're, you know, innocent players. But I don't know, just something to think about too. I mean, I was reading a book called The Cigarette Century. The you know some of the tobacco companies used to own snack food companies for you know 10, 15 years or so. So you know, part of me wonders about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she brings a good perspective that, you know, they have certain realities they have to deal with
Yeah.
beyond their control. So I think it's not, I don't know, I'm a little decided about that. I mean, she did write this book or publish this book in 2014. So, you know, there's been a lot since then. So,
You know, there's been a lot, and yet there's not been a lot. And yet there should have been so much more, right? You know, I don't think that they're necessarily innocent, but I just think they can't win for losing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like me. It's like you're damned if you do, damned if you
Yeah.
don't. So, you know, because they were making the products there again. I mean, they were using the saturated fats and stuff in the
And that
beginning.
was bad enough. You know, I'm sure those products were unhealthy enough just because they were full of tons of sugar and tons of fat. And we know those two things do not play well together.
Right.
did you catch the part where Nina was talking about Walter Willett, and he has a name, but I always call him the guy from CSPI because of how he mentions the documentary. But in the
I
middle
just
of
watched that documentary, by the way.
Yeah, they tried to sneak in saturated fats as part of that trans fat ban too. They get it to, you know, get defined as another form of trans fat. I mean, obviously that failed, but it's just weird to think that, you know, they almost got that included, and, you know, we probably won't have, you know, animal fats like we do now. So
I know. I thought that was odd too, that they were trying to get those lumped together. And it's like, but they're totally different, which of course was the reason why the FDA didn't go along with it. But it was just like, wow.
And I think that's
I really had
another,
no idea. Yeah.
that's another an example of their agenda, them trying to push that agenda. Let's get it in there with the saturated fats and make that worse. Make that whole picture look worse, you know?
Mhm.
And when they were nothing like saturated fats. That I don't remember what the guy's name was, but he said, yeah, this is not the same at all. In other words, uh, the irony is just a little much for me at times.
I
I have
know.
a question for you ladies. Maybe you might know more about this. I mean, Nina's talking about the nurse's health. It's strictly observational, even though there's data, right? But then she says like hormonal replacement therapy and vitamin E recommendations based off of the nurse health study had to be retracted because of clinical trials. And I just kind of circled that because she didn't go into much detail behind that. But when I tried to look up, hormonal replacement theory, like some people are for it, against it, and I couldn't find anything on, the vitamin E recommendation. I don't know if Kim, maybe
You
you
said
remember.
what now? What was the first part you said?
Hormonal replacement therapy and vitamin E recommendations based on, Walter Will's nurse's health study, they had to be retracted because of clinical trials. So, meaning
Yeah,
that
and I think Dr. Berry talks about that in his book. Actually, the lies my doctor told me about the hormone replacement therapy, and I believe you're right, Charlie, that what happened was they based it on preliminary results. And so they were like, okay, we need to put all these women on hormone replacement therapy because it reduces the risk of heart disease. And come to find out that was totally not correct at all. Yeah, you're right.
Huh. Yeah, and then also on the other side of the token, they had, I don't remember which study it was, but the study that came out where they said, oh yeah, HRT is leading to, or is causing all this breast cancer, and come to find out that wasn't accurate either. So it's just like one headline after the other, one scare tactic after the other, just to keep us just like, oh, let's do this, no, let's do that, no, we should do this, and it makes it really difficult for the average person to decide what they want for their health. Informed consent is important, and it makes it difficult to get informed consent when there's so many different studies that say so many different things. And hopefully your doctor is reading studies on his days off. I doubt it, but he's probably just going to conferences sponsored by whoever that has the agenda of pushing, whatever medication they want to push. So,
yeah,
and I mean,
makes me,
I'm sorry.
Makes me think about, when we were growing up in the 80s, they were, telling parents to feed their kids vegetables and stuff like that. It makes me wonder what kind of studies supported that before the recommendations,
I
where
mean,
they probably didn't have a randomized control trial of people who ate food, no broccoli, and then people who had the exact same conditions but didn't eat broccoli and followed them around for 5 years. So
yeah.
makes me kind of wonder. So
Okay, so Lisa said she was diagnosed with MS 10 years ago, and thankfully someone told her about Terry Wall's keto diet. I remember Terry Wall's, which gave me some help, but carnivore has given me my life back. I had a cousin who died slowly from MS. And, that's the experience. Like, most of us don't have MS, obviously. I'm sorry to hear that you have that diagnosis. I know it's a very difficult one, but I'm glad you're doing better with carnivore. But, most of us have different health conditions that improved with keto and really improved with carnivore.
Yeah.
And, even though carnivore is a really hard diet to do, I was just talking to my friend about it today, who, she's actually a vegetarian, but she's just a very non-judgmental person and just a sweet person anyway. And, she's just curious about it, and she cooks meat for her fiance. So, she's a little bit different, but, and open. But, she was asking me all about it, and I'm like, it's so like it's just so hard to be this way in just the world, when we're here with our people, it's kind of like our comfort zone. And I think that's why we all band together and we talk about it and stuff, because how hard, if not impossible, would it be with no support whatsoever, just being out there on your own, feeling like a crazy person half the time? I don't know about you guys, but my what I would revert to is doubting myself, and if I didn't have all these doctors and all these, people out here that are doing it, and these people that have done it for, years and years and years, I would just be, I don't think I would be able to do it. And I would not, my health would be worse because of it. So, Lisa said, I think if my cousin lived now,
her life wouldn't have
her
ended
life
in a
wouldn't have
horrible
ended in
death.
oh, that's awful, Lisa.
And I think about
I
that
also
too.
wish that for my dad who had ALS. I think it would have helped him, but it may just be me dreaming that. It may not help it at all. We don't have
Here's
any
the thing,
data
like with
on
my
that.
mom. Yeah, with my mom and her diabetes. I mean, I believe, here's the thing. I think that she was told that she could compensate with insulin, like whatever carbs she wanted to eat or whatever she could, as long as she took the insulin, that she was safe in doing that. And she believed it. But yet my grandfather had diabetes and it was managed by diet. And of course, that was how they managed it back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, they told you to eat low carb. I mean, that was what you did. I think that I don't know. I look back. I mean, I think I influenced my mother some, and I think the pandemic had a little bit to do with it. But I guess my point is, Lisa, try not to be so hard on yourself, because I don't know. We none of us can know like what impact what you like. In other words, if you had this information, if you tried to give it to them, would they have listened? Would it have made a difference? I mean, that's something we'll never know. So just try not to be hard on yourself in terms of that. I mean, I think of that all the time about my mom, and wonder if somehow I could have made influenced her to live longer, to be healthier, to not eat the things that she was eating, and to not take so much insulin. But you never know.
Yeah, but like you said, just because you have the information to give, especially when you're related to somebody, they're probably not going to listen to you. I
Yeah.
mean, I have the most supportive husband in the world, but I know I get on his nerves. I can tell by the looks on his face when I go on and on and on and on about, and at times I'm sure he's just like, okay, I guess carnivore helps everything, So I have to kind of reel it in a little, and with my sons too. I don't want to just be like, this is my whole personality now, which I mean, it kind of is, but
I hear you.
I'm kind of an all or nothing type person. And if I'm going to do this, and this is the kind of thing you don't do, a little bit. So if you're going to do it, even if you make mistakes along the way, even if you have slip ups or you have days that you just decide, okay, I'm just going to eat this today, whatever. Just being on the carnivore diet in general, it takes so much. Like the fortitude, the mental fortitude you've got to have is unbelievable. You have to be a very stubborn person. Somebody who could quit cigarettes cold turkey. So I think that even if you have the information to give, your relatives may or may not listen. Your friends may or may not listen. As I was telling Carnivorous Grandma last night, she interviewed me on her channel. And yeah, it was great. But as I was telling her last night, I'm going to be the lighthouse because, like Dr. Berry always says, nobody wants somebody just squawking in the rear constantly about it. You just do you be consistent, you do your thing, and then everybody else, you won't have to tell them because they'll see.
Mm-hmm.
They'll see the results.
Live by quiet example.
Yeah. Hey. So awesome. BK quit cigarettes 3 months ago. Yay. That is probably the best thing next to switching your diet that you could ever do.
That is awesome. Congratulations.
All right. Well, guys, Charlie, are you? I thought for a second you were locked up.
Yeah, internet connection's bad on my end. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. It hasn't been bad. You were just so still. I was like, did it lock up? So do we have what closing thoughts do we have here?
It's a good chapter. It really helped fill the gap on, how trans fat got mostly out of the food supply. I don't know. I don't know if it's completely banned or if they have like one of those, how on labels you can call it trans fat free if it has 0.5 grams or less of, trans fat in the product. I mean, there's some funny rules like that. So I don't know if it's completely banned, but it really helped fill a lot in my own narrative on diet, I guess. So it'll be interesting to read the final chapter. So I think that's where she talks about Atkins and some other things. So
yeah. So the most remarkable thing to me about this whole chapter, I'm going to read this last paragraph. The solution may be to return to stable, solid animal fats like lard and butter, which don't contain any mystery isomers or clog up any cell membranes as trans fats do, and don't oxidize as liquid oils do. Saturated fats, which also raise HDL cholesterol, start to look like a rather good alternative from this perspective. If only saturated fats didn't also raise LDL, the bad cholesterol, which remains a key piece of evidence against them. But like so many of the scientific truths that we believe, but which upon examination start to crumble, maybe the LDL raising effect isn't quite as incontrovertible.
Incontrovertible. The only reason I know how to pronounce that word is because of Pink Floyd's The Wall. Okay. Incontrovertible.
Okay.
There's no need for the jury to retire. Anyway, go ahead.
Maybe the LDL raising effect isn't quite an incontrovertible certainty either. So there you have it. Basically, just go back to what we were doing before and everything will be good.
Yeah, full circle.
Oh, and then Lisa said, Dr. Baker recently had a doctor interview where he has an ALS patient who is 4 years and still working and doing well. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I need to check that out. I have not seen it.
Yeah,
I love his really interviews. Awesome. I like watching the carnivore interviews anyway, and the keto ones, all of them. But I like watching those.
Yeah, and I like to support, all of these little individual YouTube channels, just the individual people that are just trying to, do their everyday life and figure things out. And, sometimes when they tell something that they have figured out, I'm like, oh, I've been trying to figure that out,
Yeah.
And you might get like a little nugget here and there. So.
Hey, you can always learn something. And I just enjoy the inspiration.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I think it's worth it, but you guys are correct. Many people would rather stay sick. I have discovered this, and I've also discovered that a lot of people just don't think about it. They just don't care. I guess their priorities are elsewhere. I don't know. But to me, like, maybe it's the nurse in me that has seen so much bad stuff. But to me, there's nothing aside from my family, of course, there's I mean, health is wealth. This is all I have. All I have is my health. You know, I have seen multimillionaires die just the same as the poorest of people from the same diseases in the
Yep.
same ways. So to me, I've just, ever since I've been a nurse, I've just always put, you know, my health as my top most valuable position, you know.
Mhm.
So, and I haven't always done things that improved my health like I am now, but anyway. Yeah, everybody's got to decide for themselves, that's for sure. So,
Yep.
all right, guys. Well, I guess we can wrap up. So if you guys want to check out our YouTube channels, we've got me at Carnivore Nurse Kim. Carrie is at My Metamorphosis. Charlie, sadly, we have not been able to talk him into having his own YouTube channel yet. But also, this is being streamed to Lynn's channel at Midlife Carnivore. And so check us out. Come by, say hi,
Mhm.
you know, drop some good vibes, and
Yeah.
we'll see you next week. We're going to be back for chapter 10. And I think that's the final chapter.
Yep.
So we'll see ya. Bye, guys.
Everybody have a great week.
Bye.